Hello, friends. Welcome to another podcast. I'm your host. My name is Dr. Jason Wiggins, and I am your Gen Z and Millennial expert. Welcome today. Today is Tuesday, March 9th, 2021. I hope everybody is having a marvelous day wherever you may be. And we've got a great show today. It's going to be talking about the power of responsibility. When you think about the power of responsibility, what are your first thoughts? First of all, you probably see somebody in the corner office with a nice suit, shirt, and tie, looking as sharp as possibly can be, with the great leather seat and things along that nature. Of course, a nice marble desk. Now, that is not what the power of responsibility is. It's not the power of prestige. It's the power of power and responsibility together. And those are key to when they're together as well, because can you really have power and responsibility at the same time or without each other? The answer is no, because anytime you have a responsibility, you have a sense of power, because you, in your hands, have the ability to impact either a situation or somebody else. For example, let's think about this. When you're a baby, your parents coddled you, they fed you until you learned how to move and you could walk and crawl. Now you have a high power responsibility at that point, because you have the ability to get into things and cause issues or trouble, or that could hurt you or whatnot. Now think about business, the power of responsibility. You can get hurt within business when you have power. If you go back to the early 2000s or even late 1990s, you had these power CEOs. They had a high level of power. They had a high level of responsibility. And they took it upon themselves to basically, with Enron, if you've ever heard the story, if you haven't, Google it. But Enron is about basically taking advantage of others and the company and making sure that the money is all for yourself and not the company as a whole. And it was a big debacle, and things have changed a lot since Enron, early 2000s, where now organizations understand the power of the CEO and the impact they have on an organization. So they have a lot of checks and balances now that will slow down any potential issue. So that goes back to the power of responsibility. When you have the power of responsibility, you have the ability to maybe have an impact on the financials, an impact on somebody's career growth. Part of the power and responsibility is leadership development. And leadership development is about understanding when you need to ask for help. Sometimes part of leadership development, especially if you're a younger individual and you're a promising leader and you're hoping to develop into a leader, it is important that we ask for help. So if you're Gen Z and millennial and you're in a situation where, and you're in a leadership development situation where you find yourself in over your head, there's a great opportunity to ask for help. There's no shame in asking for help and having some guidance and listening to those individuals that have been in the management or leadership for a longer period of time. They have a lot more experiences. They have a lot more organizations under their belt. And if you're Gen Z and millennial and you're just starting out, or if you've been in your job for 4 or 5 years, I would say you're still green around the ears, per se, which means there's nothing wrong with asking for help. I've ran in similar situations within my career where, you get individuals that are younger managers, younger leaders, and they're still developing. And sometimes they tend to think they can take everything on their own and are afraid to ask for help. The worst thing you can do is not utilize your resources. And that's the thing about the power of responsibility, the power of leadership, the leadership development is being able to determine when things are not going as what you expect and you have the opportunity to make a difference, but you need some guidance or tools and resources to help you get where you need to be. So that power of responsibility is very big. It's something that we should never take for granted. If we're parents, teachers, business leaders, coaches, anytime you have the ability to have the power of responsibility, then you really need to be able to utilize that responsibility in a good way. You see a lot of people abusing it, a lot of coaches, teachers, business individuals. You hear all the time in the news where maybe somebody says something wrong in a leadership position, something that could be derogatory. We do live in a sensitive society. You just cannot say what you think, what you want to say, because when you do that, the overall assumption is you might be saying something that could be perceived as derogatory or hurting others' feelings. Unfortunately, we do not live in a society any longer where you are free to say and do as you please without any repercussions. I mean, if you're Gen Z and millennials, think about Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, anything that you say, you can and will likely be held accountable for what you say, even if you begin a job and they find out later, and even if you deleted that post or somebody sees it, again, your feet are going to be held to the fire for anything you say or do. So I always say that if you have the chance to stay away from social media, Twitter, I'd be honest, I do not tweet because again, I do have a daily podcast and I can say what I think is going to be helpful, but it's important to note that be careful what you say, be careful what you do, because in the long run, it can definitely come back to bite you. Though that's why the power of responsibility is something that we all have to be accountable for. We have to utilize it in the best way possible. If we're running a business or we own a business, or you tweet something that could hurt your business, that's something you have to be very careful of. You have universities that presidents have tweeted things out, or you have business leaders for companies have tweeted something out. And when they do that, they're not only hurting themselves, they could be potentially hurting the brand. There was again, this is about being accountable for your actions. There was a story recently that came out about a Chinese restaurant, and it's a national chain, and they had some sort of training for managers. And during this training, basically it was all about trust. And again, those individuals that were taking care of the meeting and hosting the meeting, they basically had their managers, they said, trust us. And they had them stripped down to their underwear. And again, this is male and female. And when I heard about that, this is preposterous, because that is the power of responsibility. How when whoever is basically hosting that meeting, that's going to not only impact the brand, it's going to likely impact their careers once corporate finds out how they're determining what the meetings are going to be like. So again, it's important to review how you utilize your power, how you're responsible for that power. Because anytime you're in a position of authority or you control over something, the concern is if you abuse that power, there will be repercussions, and that repercussions could ultimately hurt your career, hurt your family, and so on and so on. So just keep in mind, if you're a leader growing up and with leadership development, or you're a CEO, or you own a business, just be careful that what you say, what you do, your actions, unfortunately, will determine how people think about you. And if you're a younger leader and you're just developing as a leader, keep in mind that the responsibility you have is to make sure that you run the appropriate business correctly, you utilize the resources, and make sure that sometimes it's okay to ask for help. When you ask for help, it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of, I'm willing to put my ego aside for the better good of the organization. And that's in anything we do. That's if you're a younger leader, older leader. We all have to admit that sometimes it's okay to ask for help and move forward. So again, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast about leadership and the power of responsibility and power. Because remember, power and responsibility go together. You can't have one without the other, because if you have responsibility, you have power. Even if that responsibility is put on you and you don't feel like that you have power, if you have the chance to impact something, or you're impacting a career, or you're impacting a business, that means when you have impact, you have power. So again, I want to thank all the listeners out there. I appreciate you that listen every day. And I hope that you continue to get some great content as we look forward to tomorrow. If it's in the morning, afternoon, or night, take care, be safe, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.